Hello, random people on YouTube, and welcome back to Scruffy Tales. And today we're going to return to my favorite topic, the CV90, and especially CV90s down in Ukraine. Right, so let's start off with the factory, the Ukrainian production line of CV90s. Sweden and Ukraine have agreed to try and set up a factory of sorts, of some sort, down in Ukraine. And what Ukraine has said a day or two ago is that they hope to build as many as 1,000 CV90s, which kind of coincides with the earlier rumor a couple of months back that they wanted to purchase 1,000 CV90s. Now we have the factory, and now they've said they want to build 1,000 CV90s. And why do they want CV90s? Well, they keep repeating that CV90s saves lives. It has the best armor in the war, hands down, out of all vehicles that are not main battle tanks. And it also has a pretty good gun that can deal with, all vehicles it comes across. It can even take out tanks if you're clever enough and manage to outflank it and hit it in the side and rear. And so yeah, obviously all of this adds up to Ukraine wanting to build CV90s for themselves, and they want as many as 1,000 of them in the end. What I find interesting, though, is that I found this interview with Zelensky where he points out that it was Sweden that requested that this project, this factory, would be made public knowledge, that it wouldn't be some secret operation between Sweden and Ukraine to set this up. Sweden requested that this was made public. And Ukraine, for some reason, agreed to this. I don't know why, but this is what happened. And then, you can't help but wonder why. Why make it public? Why did Sweden want it to be public? And I can only come up with two possible explanations. The first one is that it's a way to score political points in Sweden for the government. Sweden massively supports Ukraine, and I haven't met a single Swede that is against sending weapons to help Ukraine. You run into them online now and then, obviously, but I haven't met a Swede in person that is against the war, or Sweden helping Ukraine, I should say. And so it could be, and obviously the entire Swedish parliament, every political party in Sweden supports sending weapons to Ukraine to help Ukraine against Russia. So is this a way for the government, the parties in government, to score political points in Sweden? Maybe, who knows, but it's not unthinkable. Or it's just Swedish tradition to, let Russia know that Sweden doesn't give a shit. We don't give a damn. We want Russia to know that we are doing this, so Russia knows that, yes, Sweden is invested in making sure that Russia goes down, and that Russia goes down hard. And yeah, so here we are now. Cat's out of the bag. Sweden will make damn sure that Russia gets its ass kicked properly. And lately, the past week or so, we've also seen Ukraine training with the CV90s in storming trenches. They are driving straight up through trenches at speed and dismounting anywhere between 0 to 20 meters from the trench lines, basically right on top of the enemy positions, exactly the way Swedish doctrine wants you to use these vehicles, and it is also what the CV90 itself was designed to do, and how Swedish doctrine has been focused on since the 50s and 60s, taking notes from German panzer grenadiers in World War II. And now we are seeing Ukraine implementing these tactics, how to reach an enemy position and then entering into that enemy position. Obviously, they don't show how they actually breach into the trench lines, because that would give away valuable tactical knowledge to the Russians. But we do see them moving through the trench lines in waist-deep water. And this tells me that they are preparing for the coming fall, the autumn, the heavy rains that apparently are very common in Ukraine during the autumn period between summer and winter. So they are preparing for conducting operations during the fall when the rains have set in and filled all the Russian trench lines. So that is what we're seeing Ukraine training for here, pushing out with CV90 at speed, charging into the enemy position exactly the way you would if you were a Swedish soldier, and then breaching into the trench lines and fighting in waist-deep water, indicating that they are preparing to fight this war when the rains are truly setting in and filling the landscape, flooding the landscape rather, and filling up the trench lines with tons of water. Now, when I did conscription, we focused a lot on clearing out trenches and bunkers. Urban warfare was becoming a thing, but it wasn't. We didn't really focus on it. Our focus was more to actually assault trenches and clearing out bunkers. So, yeah, seeing the CV90 used for this purpose, it kind of brings back a lot of memories from my own days as a conscript. And since Swedish officers, the Swedish Army trained Ukrainians on how to use the CV90 and how to storm enemy fortifications, I shouldn't really be talking about Swedish tactics, because that might actually give away what the Ukrainians have been taught by the Swedish Army. So just leave that alone. I won't be talking about my experiences as a conscript clearing out trenches. That's training to clear out trenches, rather. That was my phone. Well, enough blabbering, moving on. So avoiding the whole issue of how Ukraine might clear out trench lines if they've been trained by Swedish officers, we might instead move on to how they actually reach the trench line and what they can do with the CV90s and other vehicles, obviously, once they are through the Russian defenses, once they are moved past the Russian minefields. And strangely enough, we're going to have to take a look at how Russia conducted an assault on Klishivka to understand how an armored assault with infantry fighting vehicles, tanks, and artillery is best conducted. And I actually haven't seen Ukraine perform any type of assault in this way yet. Probably because of the Russian minefields, but Russia actually conducted a more or less perfect armored assault against Klishivka, or almost perfect, and we'll go through it. So I believe it was a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, that Russia conducted a armored assault against the town of Klashivka. It's located south of Bakhmut. And as you can see here, we have 2 BMP-2s and 1 tank. If it's a T-72 or a T-90, I don't know. But they are going to be crossing this massive field, no cover at all. It's a big flat meadow, basically. And you can see the town at the top of the village, and you have the 3 Russian vehicles at the bottom where the arrow is located. So So, and as the Russians advance, and they're doing this at full speed, they're not being, careful, not trying to zigzag, they're not trying to find some cover. They have only one choice, and they need to cross this open space as fast as possible. And that means going full tilt in a straight line, firing everything they've got, both the BMPs and the tank, while the artillery is pounding the town, and there's a big hill behind the town that is also getting pounded by artillery. And this is done to deny the enemy any chance to fire back at them as they are crossing this wide open space that is so dangerous. They have no choice. They have to go full tilt, and then they need to make sure that no one gets a chance to take aim and shoot at them. So continuous suppression aimed at the enemy during the advance. Artillery, tank, and IFVs deny the enemy a chance to shoot back. And this is really effective, and this is what Ukraine needs to do if they would be assaulting trenches or Russian positions when they're through the minefields. And as you can see here, the leftmost picture, BMPs and the tank, they're all firing. And then middle picture, you can see they are now closing in on the town. They are still firing. You can see all the smoke being dropped by artillery, and there's explosions going on in the town. And the suppression doesn't let down even as Russia is really close, right? Obviously, you can't be firing mortars and artillery when they are too close to the town. But this is where the combined arms training comes into play. The people in charge of the indirect fire really need to know how long they can fire on the town without risking the vehicles pushing in. So this is actually very difficult, because if you mess up with indirect fire, you might end up actually damaging, destroying your own vehicles and killing your own troops. But Russia is doing a really good job here in hitting the town with indirect fire and then stopping just as the vehicles approach and are close enough to be in the danger zone. And then the vehicles, well, they're now so close that they are inflicting panic on the enemy. The enemy they're in the buildings, they're in trenches, and they know that just beyond the smoke there's a bunch of enemy vehicles firing at anything. And it's terrifying at this point for the Ukrainians. Now something weird happens though. The BMPs stop, and you can see it. There's like dozens and dozens of meters left to the town, and the soldiers dismount in the open. There's no cover. There's nothing there to protect them or that they can hide behind. They dismount in the open and are now forced to run dozens of meters before finding cover, before getting into the town and reaching a building or whatever. Very strange. What the vehicles should have done is decide on where to push in and there dismount the troops, right, in cover. You can't chicken out, because now also the vehicles are now in the open. If someone now at this point takes a peek, they have stationary targets that they can shoot at. So the vehicles are vulnerable and the infantry are very vulnerable. This is very strange tactics, to my mind, from the Russians. They made everything, every decision they've taken up to this point was perfect. And here, for some reason, they fuck up. They don't push all the way into the enemy positions and dismount in cover. They dismount at a distance where they are sitting ducks. After this, the vehicles all leave. They have dismounted 2 squads of infantry, leaving them on their own to run dozens of meters into cover, and then the vehicles pull out for some reason. So you have 2 squads of infantry completely on their own in a town controlled by the enemy. I don't know what these 2 squads are supposed to be able to do on their own, because there's no support coming in. There are not more BMPs bringing in more troops. So it's what the point of this assault was. I don't know. Again, Russia fucks up. They pushed across the field doing everything right. And then it all comes apart. There's no platoon following up to bring in more troops. There's no platoon flanking or anything like that as they put pressure on the enemy, and I don't know what's going on here. So what Ukraine needs to be doing is they need to do what Russia did up until the point where they stopped to dismount. They need to push into cover, let the soldiers dismount into cover, so they then can start the assault straight away without being shot to pieces in the open. And the vehicles, they don't have to always operate together with infantry. Vehicles often pull away from the infantry to do their own thing, but they never leave them alone, because then soldiers will just get picked apart, right? So the CV90s, they need to charge across the fields with mortar and artillery support together with a Leopard 2 tank, preferably, and apply all this pressure on the enemy, get in close, dismount in cover, and then continue the assault into point blank range, into the faces of the Russians, with the CV90s nearby to provide support, to deal with the enemy vehicles popping up, to suppress Russians further down the trench line and stuff like that. So yeah, very strange. Russia began this assault 100% perfect, and then it all came apart as soon as they stopped to dismount the troops. No clue what went on here, and my guess is that these 2 squads of Russians got wiped out as Ukraine closed in on their position. Now I want to talk about the CV90s getting hit by various stuff and getting damaged. And let's start off with my massive fuck up in my video where I was talking about how Russia took out the CV90 that ended up in Moscow. I said that I speculated that it was hit by a rather large heat warhead as it took the hit to the front of the turret, because I hadn't heard of RPG-7 munitions having rocket boosters, a 2-stage system. And wouldn't you know it, after answering a bunch of comments like a douchebag, I've never seen any evidence of RPG-7 having rocket boosters? You know, eventually I found a video detailing RPG-7 warheads having rocket boosters. Goddamn my phone. And so there you go. It was probably a standard RPG-7 that launched a rocket-boosted warhead straight into the front of the CV90 turret. The outcome was still the same. It did not penetrate. It didn't kill the gunner. And it was the flanking hit, whatever that was, that took out the CV90 in the end. So there we go. I've come clean, I fucked up, and here you have an image of a standard RPG-7 round igniting its rocket boosters. Not every round has them, just a couple, just a few, probably tandem warheads. But anyway, enough of that. Moving on. Ukraine has obviously mentioned that the crew of CV90s, they survive even after the vehicle has been hit by tanks. Ukraine has also said that the crew of CV90s, they survive after being hit by Lancet drones. So far we have something like 3 or 4 confirmed losses of the 51 CV90s that has been shipped to Ukraine. So Ukraine has said that one was taken out by a tank, which probably is the one that eventually ended up in Moscow. Another was taken out by a Lancet drone, according to Ukraine. And then we have a drone video, a drone footage that confirms we have one abandoned CV90 outside of Bakhmut. So, we have like 50 confirmed Bradley kills, for instance, and compare that to 3, 4 confirmed CV90s being taken out. Pretty significant. So what does it all boil down to? Well, if Ukraine manages to build a factory during this war that produces CV90s at a steady pace, I mean, it will impact the war, undoubtedly. You're going to have CV90s rolling off the production line straight to the front line. And not only that, Ukraine will be able to, my goddamn phone, Ukraine will also be able to produce spare parts for the CV90s. And I mean, this will obviously have a tremendous impact on the war. And like I've written here, it could potentially tip the war in Ukraine's favor if they can keep their CV90s going with their own spare parts, and if they can, keep replacing losses with freshly made CV90s. And I also think that it will be more than likely, I feel, that Ukraine will make a deal with Sweden to have CV90s armed with anti-tank guided missiles, ATGMs, because the CV90 can be equipped with either Spike or Akron ATGMs, and both are very advanced and very powerful anti-tank missiles. And the French Akron, Spike is Israeli, Akron French, and Akron is potentially the most advanced and most powerful anti-tank guided missile in the world to date. So that's why I think Ukraine probably wants to combine the powerful 40mm Bofors automatic cannon with very potent anti-tank guided missiles to really be able to dominate Russia out on the big vast farmlands where the ATGMs would rule supreme, and with the 40mm they can dominate Russia in urban settings and in woodlands where missiles are basically useless. And I mean, the 50 CV90s Ukraine have, they are already affecting the battlefields in Ukraine's favor. where they are deployed, whether it be in Crimea, where they are holding the line against continuous Russian assaults to try and push forward, or at Bakhmut, where Ukraine is slowly but surely pushing in to surround the city. And that's 50 CV90s. If you add another 100, you will obviously increase that ability even more. And if you increase that number to 500, then you won't be just affecting a battlefield or two. You will be able to affect an entire section of the front line. You will be able to breach a section of the front line. Obviously, 500 CV90s won't be popping up overnight, and definitely not 1,000. This is something that will be built up, produced over a long time, over several months. And that won't happen until the factory has been built, and that will take quite a while as well. So this is not going to happen this year, and who knows if this will even be a reality next year. But still, the power of these vehicles and the capability of them, if you amass 500, if you amass 1,000, there is really nothing in the Russian arsenal that can contend with those numbers, and those numbers combined with the firepower that those numbers bring. So the excellent armor that protects the crew with the mobility that allows these vehicles to move everywhere, and you combine with the 40mm autocannon that can destroy tanks if the angle is correct, and potentially with a Spike or Akron anti-tank guided missile added to it all, that CV90, the Ukrainian CV90 that I predict will be reality a year from now, that will be an absolute nightmare for Russian troops on the front line. And they won't be fielded by the few dozens like they are now. They will be fielded by the hundreds. And those numbers, with that firepower, could potentially end the war and kick Russia out of Ukraine. Well, that's it for now. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Hope it was interesting. I'm sorry for the phone beeping all the time. Well, with all that said, go på marsch Ukraine, give them hell, and bring the wrath.